All right, let's see how we can create tables. So we have this table element for representing tabular data. In the past, we used this element for laying out pages, but these days that's considered a bad practice because we have better ways for creating layouts. We'll talk about them later in the course. So just remember, the table element should only be used for displaying tabular data, like this table over here. So in this table, we're going to have one or more rows. To define a row, we use the TR or table row element. In this element, we can have one or more cells, which can be data cells or header cells. Let me show you the difference. So look at this table. In this table, we have a bunch of rows. In each row, we have 4 cells, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The cells in the first row are called header cells because here we have labels that define what each column represents. All the other cells in this table are called data cells because they contain data. So back to our code. In this row, we're going to have 2 data cells. To define a data cell, we use the TD element. That is short for table data cell. So in this cell, I'm going to say marketing. And let's define another cell. Here we can add the amount we spent on marketing. Let's say $100. Now let's define another row. But this time I'm going to use Zen coding. So we want a TR element. Inside this element, we want 2 TD elements. So TD times 2. Good. Now let's say accounting. And we spent $200 here. Save. So here's what we get. By default, our table doesn't have any styles. So here we don't have a border, we don't have background colors, and so on. But as you can tell, we can use CSS to style this table. So here in the style element, let's add a rule for our table element. So table. Let's give this table a border. So we set border. Now here we have to type 3 values. The first value represents the thickness of the border. I want a really thin border, so I'm going to go with 1 pixel. The second value represents the style of the border. Our border can be a solid line, it can be a dashed line or a dotted line, and so on. So I'm going to go with a solid line. Next, we specify the color of the border. For this demo, I'm going to go with, let's say, gray. Okay, now take a look. So we have a border around the table element, but we also want a border around each cell, right? So back to our CSS, let's define a style for our TD element. Now here I'm going to copy this line and then paste it. But there's a problem in this code. If tomorrow we decide to change the color or the thickness or the style of the border, we have to make that change in 2 different places, over here and over here. So duplication in code is bad. That's why we have the DRY principle in software engineering. DRY is short for don't repeat yourself. So we want to apply this style to both the table and TD elements. How? Super easy. Over here, we type a comma and then type the TD element. Now, all the styles that we define here will be applied to both these elements. And with this, we can get rid of the duplication. Good. So take a look. Here's what we get, but there's a tiny problem. Let me zoom in so you see clearly. We have some space between the borders of the neighboring cells. This looks ugly. Let me show you how to get rid of it. So back to our style, we have another property called border collapse. If we set this to collapse, this would collapse the borders in neighboring cells. Let me show you what I mean. So these 2 cells are neighbors, right? Currently, their borders are separated. Now, by applying border collapsing, these 2 borders will be collapsed into a single border. So back to our code, let's save the changes, and here's what we get. That's better. But there's another problem. We need some space around the data in each cell. Currently, our data is so close to the edges of each cell. So back to our CSS. Here we can set padding to, let's say, 5 pixels. Now we have some padding around the data in each cell. Much better. Now let's add a header to this table. So in this table, we're going to add another row. In this row, we're going to have 2 header cells. To define a header cell, use the TH element. TH is short for table header cell. So TH times 2. Look, we have the same structure as before, but instead of using the TD element, we are using the TH element, okay? Now in the first cell, I'm going to say category, and for the second cell, I'm going to say amount. Now, here's what we get. Of course, I've zoomed in here, so what you should see actually looks like this. So don't let that confuse you. Now, pay close attention to these header cells. These header cells have a different style from our data cells. They don't have a border and they don't have padding either. So back to our CSS, let's apply these styles to our TH elements as well. Save the changes. Here's what we get. That's better. So this is the basic way of defining a table. Now, there is nothing particularly wrong with this structure, but we can improve it and make it more meaningful to search engines and screen readers. So we want to tell search engines that in this table, we have two sections, a header and a body. To do that, we're going to use the T-head and T-body elements. So inside the table, first we add a T-head element, that is short for table head. Then we should move the first row inside the T-head element. Now let me show you how to select multiple lines using keyboard. So I'm going to hold down the Shift button, and then using the down or up arrows, we can select multiple lines, okay? Now that we have selected these lines, we can hold down the Alt key and then press up or down arrows to move code. Much easier. So we have a header section. Next, we should define the body section. So after T-head, we add T-body, and then we move these two rows inside the body section. So like this. Good. We get the same output as before, but our markup is more meaningful to search engines and screen readers. This is what we call semantic HTML. Semantic means meaningful, okay? Now, inside this T-head element, we can have multiple rows. So let me add another row. And in this row, I just want to add one cell, one header cell. Let's say expenses. So let's take a look. Here's our new cell. But what if I want to expand this cell so it goes up to here? That is very easy. Here's our header cell. In this element, we set the call span attribute to 2. Call span is short for column span, and it determines how many columns this cell should expand to. The default value is 1, but here we're saying 2, so this cell should take 2 columns. Now, take a look. That's better. So we have a header with 2 rows and a body. Now, optionally, we can add a footer. So after the T-body element, we add a T-foot element. And in this element, we add one row with 2 header cells. So TR greater than TH times 2. In the first cell, I'm going to say total. And in the second cell, I'm going to say $300. Take a look. So that's our footer. And once again, we can have multiple rows in the footer to summarize data in different ways. Now, I have a question for you. What are the differences between header and data cells in terms of styling? Pause the video and think about it for a couple of seconds. Here's the answer. In header cells, by default, our text is bold and aligned in the center. In contrast, in data cells, our text is aligned to the left. But in this case, I want to align 300 to the left, so it perfectly aligns with these other numbers. How do we do that? Super easy. Back to our CSS, we want to define a rule for the T-foot element. Here I'm going to set text align to left. And now, all the cells in the footer are aligned to the left.